and then I had to get home before Sunday night to catch my flight back to Melbourne so I could start work on Monday morning.
Wow, you must have been knackered at the end of that. Were
No,
you tired?
adrenaline, mate.
Oh, adrenaline.
Adrenaline. Anyway, when I went into work Monday, people said, "Oh, how's your weekend, Bob?" And I said, "Don't ask. You don't want to know where I've been."
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding. I'm your host, Guillaume Doerig. My guest today is a fanatical birder, and he has photographed over 770 species of birds in Australia. He has always loved wildlife, but became serious about photography 9 years ago. He often speaks at club meetings around Melbourne about his many adventures. He has travelled to the most remote places to photograph birds, including the Cocos Keeling Islands, Christmas Island, Norfolk Island and the Torres Strait Islands. In addition, he has conducted many trips into Central Australia chasing desert birds. What a dream. Many of his photos have ended up in books, magazines and signage at wildlife parks, and he also runs 2 popular Facebook groups on birds. Recently, he is also focusing on photographing reptiles and frogs, as well as mammals, such as whales. He has taken part in close to 70 pelagic trips at sea to photograph the wonderful albatrosses, petrels and shearwaters of Australia. Known in the wildlife community as Bok, he's here with us now, and it's Bernie O'Keefe. How are you, Bok?
Good, thank you, Guillaume. Yeah, very excited to be here. Really appreciate the invitation.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and I'm sure it will be a cracking episode. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Where do you get the joy from birding?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm often asked this, and yeah, obviously to find a bird and photograph, it's really exciting. But I think it's more about the journey. I think it's about the people you meet, the places you go to that you probably wouldn't ever dream of going. And often when I look at a photo or talk about a photo at a presentation, the memories of the journey come back. And a little bit later on, we'll be elaborating a little bit on some of those journeys. But yeah, I'd probably say, yeah, the journey itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting answer because it ties in with the fact that you get to see these amazing places as well. You get into the bird's environment. And yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And so have you been into birding a long time or has it been something more recent?
Yeah, no, I as a kid, I was just a fanatical wildlife nut. So I kept reptiles, I kept frogs, I had aviaries full of birds. I'm not really into keeping that sort of stuff anymore, I think, but in those days, 40, 50 years ago, it was quite acceptable to do that. So I was always really keen on wildlife. My plan was when I retire to see if I could photograph every bird in Australia. But my circumstances changed about 10 years ago and my personal circumstances. So I saw that as an opportunity to sort of get started in one of these dreams while I still had a bit of cash to splash, so to speak, while I'm still working. So yeah, that's really, I always loved it, but got really serious about it 9 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm interested in how specifically you got into photography as well, because that's sort of it's you could almost say it's a different hobby in some sense.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. The main reason I got into photography, and I wasn't a photographer before this, but sadly, genetically, there's dementia in the family. So mum and dad both passed away in the last year or two, and mum suffered terribly from dementia. So my reasoning was I would hate to get to the situation where I see a bird and I can't remember about it or can't remember the journey. So I thought, having a collection of photos is a really good way of revisiting those days and those journeys. And that's the main reason I photograph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more of an art form as to record a rare bird, would you say?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. In my time in birding, the serious birding 9 years, most of my friends who I started birding with, they weren't into photography, and they were just really happy to see a bird, as I am. And then as social media came up and became more popular, all of those guys ended up going into birding, going into photography. So it has, the ratio of birders and photographers, that gap has just really closed in my time in birding. And I guess they all have a variety of different reasons why they do that. But, it's nice to actually get on social media and share your stuff. I think that's inspiring for people. And it also helps create networks. And networks, as I'll say a bit later on, they're terribly critical when it comes to the birding community. If we share that information, it's a great way of actually providing the opportunity to actually see that bird one day and photograph it.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll get on to that a little bit later as well, as you say. But for the moment, I'm really excited to get into these epic trips that you've done. So we're gonna focus on two of them, if that's okay, in this episode.
Yep.
And so the first one is the Princess Parrot trip. Tell us about that.
Oh, okay. Well, as you probably know, the Princess Parrot is one of Australia's rarest parrots. Probably more because the area and environment and habitat they're in is just so hard to access. Always wanted to see one. I guess it's one of the holy grails in Australian birding. There's a lot of birders who have seen more birds than I have in Australia, and they haven't seen a Princess Parrot. So, and there are some guiding companies that will run trips to Central Australia to help you find the Princess Parrot, but they're so damn expensive, and there's no guarantee. We're talking about 10 grand plus for a seat.
Wow.
So I thought, look, yeah. And actually, the year I did it, they ran an expedition in May, and people paid 11,000, and they didn't even get it. So I thought, no, I can't afford that. I reckon I can probably, with a bit of luck, do it myself. So we left in September 2018 during my school holidays. So I had a window of about 2 weeks, but I spent 12 months planning it. And when I say about planning it, it's about researching the spots where they've been seen, talking to people who have made the expedition about road conditions, about weather, where can we get fuel, all that sort of thing. And it's probably the most rugged trip I've ever done. And it was myself and a mate of mine, Glenn Pacey, we decided we'd do this trip. So, as I said, a lot of preparation went into it. We were really hamstrung by getting permission to actually get up there on Indigenous land. And it was only after my third attempt that they realised I was, quite serious about it. I wasn't going to go away. So I was granted permission, which was wonderful. So 12 months in planning, as I said, the main site we thought we'd focus on was a place called Jupiter Well. Jupiter Well.
Wow.
Yeah. Is historically a pretty good place for them. So we thought that's what we're going to do, go to Jupiter Well. So Jupiter Well's in WA, but it's 750 kilometres west of Alice Springs. And after you do the first 100 Ks, you are then on really dirt, rocky roads. So it's a long battle. And we took our own fuel. I mean, there's so many things you got to take, satellite phone, all that stuff, extra fuel, extra food, extra tires. And by the time the word got out that Glenn and I were doing this trip, and then I had a number of people approach me and said, can we come too? Can we come too? And in the end, I thought, look, probably safety in numbers. If one of our cars breaks down in the middle of nowhere, you're really in a fair bit of trouble. You're talking about 40-degree days, very sparse, harsh environments. So in the end, 6 people came along in 4 vehicles, and we called ourselves the Thunderbirds. I don't know if you remember that cartoon series, but my car was Thunderbird 1 because we all had radios and walkie-talkies. It was really important to sort of just the front car, let other people know there were feral camels on the road or whatever. And then there were a couple of little Indigenous communities where we could fuel up. But so a lot of planning went into it, Guillaume, a lot of planning. And we got there. Look, we weren't really even sure whether there's a chance of seeing them, but we thought we'll give ourselves a go. And we got them on the second day we were there. We saw 7 fly over. So pretty excited about that, just really crappy photos. And then the following day, we had, I think it was 42 fly over our campground at Jupiter. So we're really inspired by this. And I remember this is very, very hot weather, very uncomfortable weather. And then the next day we went out and we found 5 of them on a dead tree, and they flew down into some bushes. So we crawled over the sand dune, just got the most amazing shots of Princess Parrot. And there were tears, there were high fives, and it was just an incredible experience and one I'll never forget. I did write a trip report for it, which has sort of become well-known. It's actually a friend, Glenn Pacey, who was in Cocos Keeling Island, and he visited a birder over there, and they had the trip report all printed out in a plastic folder as one of their resources. So that was nice. And when we eventually got back to Alice Springs, I posted on Facebook, and it just went ballistic. But we had a lot of car trouble on the way back, so it was really good to have 2 amateur mechanics with us. Otherwise, we'd probably still be out there.
Yeah, incredible,
amazing experience, and and actually. A company went out last year to do a recce for it using my report, and they didn't get them before they actually decided to take a tour. So these conditions are really harsh.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a really tough bird because, as far as I know, they're what's the word? Notoriously nomadic.
Yes.
So you can't, wow, that's just amazing. So how big was the group that went? How many people?
Yeah, 6 people in 4 cars.
Right.
So when I speak at one of the more popular topics that I speak at these clubs and presentations is the Princess Parrot trip. And so I take them, step by step about how we got there. One thing I did, which I think all birders are going to really appreciate, the day before we left Alice Springs, we popped into the centre that actually eventually awarded us permits to get in. And we dealt with a lady, her name was Sonzi. So I bought her the most expensive bottle of red wine and went up and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And she said, oh, well, I better let all birders in now. So if you get a permit, it could be because of that gesture.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I want to touch briefly on that. So what was the process of obtaining the permits? I'm interested in that because you went on Indigenous land. So what was the process?
Yeah. Look, it's all in the trip report, even the numbers you bring, but you have to apply for a permit. And as I said, it took me 3 times, and I was just completely honest and said I'm a bird photographer. And I would like to go onto your land. Not back. And when I rang them and asked, they said, look, we've had bird photographers before go up there and they destroy the nest of Princess Parrots, trying to get a better photo, sticking sticks in hollows and things like that. I said, we're not going to do that. But, it was just my word, I guess. And then applied again, no, for the same reason. Again, I was being completely honest. I mean, I could have said I was just traveling through and I probably would have got the permit. And then the 3rd time I said, look, can you please ring my principal? Because what I do with my photos, I run sessions at school, and we've got 1,500 students at the school, and they're really popular. And it's about passing on the excitement of our wildlife in Australia. And most of our students are Vietnamese, and they just haven't been out of Melbourne. And it has created a lot of consciousness about the environment and about our wildlife. So none of my stuff I do for profit. Every photo I've ever donated for signage, magazines, or books, free. And it's never about profit. Presentations, I always donate the gift back. It's about sharing. It's about sharing and spreading the news. And I learned that from a really, one of my early mentors, Dan Mantle in WA. And that's another story, but maybe for another time.
Yeah, for another episode.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What a dream. Oh, it's just so great. And you got to have so much. We can get onto this also a little bit later, but you got to have good organizational skills as well, you know, to get time off work and to organize all the different aspects of the equipment. And it must have been. Have you repeated a trip like that since? When was the Princess Parrot trip? When was it?
It was September 2018. Now, I'm very fortunate being a teacher and in a Catholic college. We get pretty generous holidays. So all of my holidays are basically tied up with trips. So as I said, we had a 2-week window of opportunity. And you're right. And I think later on I'll talk about organisation. But, you know, it's funny, Gam. You know, people say to me, God, you're lucky getting this bird and that bird. I go, well, actually, the harder I work and the more I research, the luckier I become. So, you know, obviously luck does play a little element, but, you know, you've got to do the research. You've got to talk to people. You've got to find out where these birds are. You've got to learn their habitat, you know, time of year, that sort of stuff. So I didn't actually have to get the time off work because it was during school holidays. Yeah, a lot of organisation. And in the trip report, I've got a checklist of what you need to do. You need the HEMA roadmap, because people have got no idea just how remote this area is, how dangerous it is. I mean, you've got to even be careful sleeping at night in case a herd of feral camels walks over your tent. You know, if you're bitten by a snake out there. I did have a beacon, which they guarantee if you push that button, you'll get rescued within 3 hours anywhere in Australia. I don't know if that's true. Luckily, didn't have to use it, and the weather was just so hot. I know a mate of mine from Alice Springs went up the following week after we got up there, but he's just said it was too hot.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. So we got a permit for 10 days, but we got the birds, as I said, 3 days in a row, and then we said, we're out of here. It was just too hot. And that's the other thing. You got to bring your own water, even though Jupiter Welt is a beautiful place to camp, and there's photos of it in the trip report, and the water there is fine. But just look, you know, in the 3 or 4 days we were there, we had 2 cars drive past, and they were together. Never saw another vehicle, another person.
Oh, that's just amazing. And I think that loops back to what we were saying at the beginning about the joy of being in these amazing places.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, to answer your question too, no, I haven't been back, but that's largely due to COVID in Melbourne and lockdown. Will I go back one day? Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, and the pressure will be off because we've got the Princess Parrot. I'd probably like to look more at the herps next time. But there's a lot of photos of reptiles in the trip report too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. It's just great. I hope to do that one day as well. The farthest in remote places that I've been was at Sturt National Park, which is also really beautiful.
Whereabouts? Sorry.
Sturt National Park. Cameron Corner. Yeah, that's also really nice. I went with my dad a few years ago. But there's something about being in those amazing places, and to shift to the other trip that I wanted to discuss, the Black Grasswren trip. Was that similar? First of all, when was it, and was it similar to the Princess Parrot trip in any way?
Absolutely the opposite. It's a great story, and I often share this story at presentations. So put your seatbelt on.
Will do.
A really good friend of mine, Phil Maher, is a birding guide, in Australia. Most people will know him. Most birders who watch this will know him. And he specialises in the Plains Wanderer. But he does run a trip in WA, which combines Northern Territory, which goes for about 3 weeks. And one of the final legs is that you can actually pay an extra $1,000 on this trip and go for the Black Grasswren. So I said to him, if ever you get a person who says, no, we don't want to do that leg, it's an optional leg, give me a ring and I would love to take up that opportunity. So this is a funny story. So this is probably about 4 years ago. It was in May, and he rang me on a Tuesday night and said, hey, Bock, do you want to come on a Black Grasswren trip? I said, awesome. Yes. When is it? He said, this Saturday. I said, I want it. I want that seat. I want that seat. So I went and saw my principal and said, principals get used to this with birders, or employers get used to this. I need a day off to chase this really rare bird. He said, yeah, you go for it. We'll call it a mental health day. So I got straight on the internet and made my bookings. Now, the seat that I bought from Phil was $950. So I got on the internet. After school Thursday, I flew to Darwin. So stayed in Darwin Thursday night. Got up early next day, drove 9 hours to Kununurra, just over the WA border. And that's where we were meeting Phil on the Saturday. So stayed in Kununurra that night. Early next morning, met up with Phil and the rest of the group. And we flew in a light aircraft about 2.5 hours up into the middle of the Kimberley, or northern part of the Kimberley, to a place called the Mitchell Plateau. We landed on a desert strip. I wouldn't even know if it was a strip. It was just dirt. And there were 3 helicopters there waiting for us. And we jumped in the helicopters and they took us into the Mitchell Plateau campground. So we had 2 hours to find this Black Grasswren. So, the pressure's on. Anyway, we started walking around and Phil saying, oh my God, where I usually get them, it's all burnt, all the spinifex burnt.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, no. Then I sort of went ahead of the group, and I heard a grasswren, and I called everyone up, and this beautiful male jumped in front of a rock, and then he started calling, and the female jumped next to him. Got the most incredible, all of us got the most incredible photos, and we spent about half an hour with them. They just played, and then he said, okay, we have to go. So, got the Kimberley honey eater while I was there, and superb dragon too, and the yellow-faced partridge pigeon at the campground. And then we hopped in the choppers, went straight back to the aeroplane, flew back to Kununurra, and then I had to get home before Sunday night to catch my flight back to Melbourne so I could start work on Monday morning.
Wow, you must have been knackered at the end of that. Were
you
tired?
Adrenaline, mate.
Adrenaline.
Anyway, when I went into work Monday, people said, oh, how's your weekend, Bock? And I said, don't ask. You don't want to know where I've been. I put that story on Facebook recently, and on the Grasswrens of Australia site, which is my site, which is really popular. I put that story up with some photos from the Black Grasswren and told the story, how I got there. And people said, you're either crazy or so committed. We love your commitment. And that's what birding's about. It's about, having a goal and doing everything you can to actually achieve that goal. So, yeah, that is a good story and very fond memories to spend your weekend in the northern part of Australia in the middle of the Kimberleys.
That's just fascinating. That's so great. And you mentioned that you had this Facebook group, Grasswrens of Australia. So is that one of the groups that you created, or you're an admin of, or how many groups on Facebook are you managing?
Yeah, 2. I created Grasswrens of Australia. And I also created Quails, Button Quails, and Quail Thrushes of Australia. And they're both really popular groups. What I've done in the last 6 months, I've asked a really good friend of mine to help me admin the Grasswren site, and I've asked a really good friend of mine from South Australia and Tasmania to help me administer the quails, button quails, and quail thrushes of Australia. Just because, because there's so many bots trying to get in, and I just found it was really time consuming. But I'm really proud of the members on there. There's never any rubbish and fighting or arguing. It's just all about inspiring and sharing. And I know a lot of people have found these birds because of posts that have been put into those Facebook. So yeah, I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, beautiful. That's awesome. And I just want to wrap up the trip segment because you've gone to lots of islands. So the Cocos Keeling, Christmas Island. So why have you chosen these places also to go to? What about islands speak to you?
Yeah, well, I guess it comes back to when I was a kid. We had our field guides, or I think the common one in Australia in those days was "What bird is that?" And you look at these field guides and you just dream and think, one day I would love to see one of those birds. But in order to see some of those birds, you've got to travel and travel to some of these islands. And there's a fellow by the name of Richard Baxter who runs a lot of these island tours. And he's great. Richard's great. He's been doing that for a number of years. So I was lucky enough to join him on a tour about 5 or 6 years ago. And we went to Cocos Keeling Island, which is Australia's best kept secret. It's just a tropical paradise with turtles and sharks, reef sharks, just, when you're wading around the water, it's just incredible. So went there, and part of that trip was also to go to Christmas Island. And we were really lucky because we got there and the red crab migration had just started. So be part of that and see these red crabs come into your motel room. And it was just fantastic. So, so that was a beautiful trip. And also I was lucky enough to do another one of Richard's trips, which investigated and researched the Torres Strait Islands. And we went right up to Saibai Island, which you can see New Guinea from there, 3 k's away. And it's a really good chance to see some New Guinea species that will fly across and eat the fruits on those islands. So that was a wonderful trip too. And I've been to Norfolk. That was great. I haven't done Lord Howe yet. I was planning to do that, but COVID has sort of slowed that down. And one day I'm planning to do Macquarie Island. And this year I was meant to be on the Ashmore Reef trip, which leaves, I think, in early November, but I can't get in the WA. So the company was really, really good in allowing me to transfer my ticket to next year. So, yeah. There's something special. If you really like the tropics, something special about those islands, just wading along the beaches there with all this incredible wildlife, and you can do a bit of snorkeling there too. It's just beautiful. Well, appeals to me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course I can understand why. And when we take into account the Princess Parrot trip and the Black Grasswren trip and all these trips to these islands, and I'm sure many more that we haven't touched on, at the risk of repeating myself, what is it that drives you to these remote places?
I guess I'll go back to what I said before, and that is, as a kid looking at these field guides, oh my God, I'd love to see that in real life. So I guess that's my incentive, that's my motivation, that's my inspiration. And again, it's not just about seeing the bird, it's about seeing places. One of the things I love about going out to the desert places, and I do that quite a lot, is I love the people you meet out there. Go to a local pub in the middle of the desert and the characters you meet there, Mungarani, which is halfway between Murray and Birdsville. It's an iconic pub. And just getting to know, these cowboys there, and it's just so refreshing. And they're all so friendly, and so it's interesting. It's great to see the birds, but again, the journey is just amazing.
Yeah, and the people,
and the people, absolutely, and the geography. I probably don't take enough photos of the habitat, and I'm starting to learn that now, that I need to start taking. So it puts a bird in perspective about their habitat. So I am going to start doing that more and put them on with my photos. I know a lot of people do that, and I think it adds to the post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
And so when I wanted to ask also, when you go on these trips, do you use eBird to record your observations?
Yes and no. When I first started, absolutely. I used to just eBird everything. And actually in 2013, I got awarded on eBird Australia's Birder of the Year for the most species seen. That's still in the records there. And then I went to Cocos and Christmas, and they don't actually include that in the Australian list. And I sort of lost a little bit of motivation to do it. But I really travel by myself now. I usually travel with, I've got a couple of really close birding friends. Scott Baker, you've probably heard of.
Yeah.
Owen Lishman, Dan Ashdown, Jaden Walsh. And they're the Rob Farnes, who's got a book. They're the guys I travel with. And they're eBird nuts. So I basically do all the driving because we take my vehicle.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with that. And I do most of the driving. So while I'm driving, these people are eBirding. So the information is getting out there. It's just not necessarily from me. So I let them do that part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because there are advantages to doing eBird and not doing eBird, but it is, like I've said before on the pod, it's a powerful tool, for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And I actually, as it happens, just recorded an episode with Scott just before we did ours.
Okay.
So that was great to meet him virtually, and it's really good to have. I do think it's good to have quite a tight knit group to go birding with, or at least regularly go birding with the same people, because you can count on each other really well, and you can kind of know each other's method of birding. So I think that's a really good way to go birding for sure.
Absolutely. And you've got to remember, if you're going for 2 weeks, you're living with this person, driving, living in the same campsite, eating with them. You've got to get on. And, if you don't, it makes the trip not as enjoyable. That hasn't really happened much, but those guys are true and trusted companions that I often go with. Rob Farnes and Scott and I, for 6 years, went to did a pelagic off Kiama looking for one particular species, and we finally got it this year, the white-necked petrel. So we have fun driving up. We talk all sorts of stuff, talk cricket, footy, and stay in the local pub up there. They're good days.
To stay up to date with new episodes of the Birding Today podcast, please follow Birding Today on Facebook and Instagram, as well as subscribing to the YouTube channel. I wanted to go back to what we said about photography and touch on that a little bit more, because it must be a huge part of why you enjoy going on these trips, and also locally, I imagine.
Yeah.
So how? I suppose we already touched on this, so we don't need to go that deeply back into it. But balancing the birding and the bird photography is interesting. But also, how did you get your photos published in these books and magazines? Are you approached by people, or do you have to actively search for some options?
Yeah, no, I've never ever searched. People have approached me, and I guess the first time it happened, and that's mainly through social media. I'm not the greatest fan of social media. I'm on Facebook, but I only use it for basically wildlife. You've checked out my thing. I don't put political comments on or things like that, or what's pissing me off. So basically, I have people ask me, they go, "Oh, gee, I saw that photo. Do you mind if I put it in a book or magazine?" And I go, "Sure." And I had one fellow, The Birds of Kangaroo Island. I think I've got 57 photos in that book. And the guy that actually contacted me, he passed only a couple of years ago, so that was very sad. But and that sort of got me thinking, and I've had more since then. The Aviculture Society of Australia, their front cover, one of my photos is that, the Norfolk Island parakeet when I was over there. And I've got a friend of mine, a herpetologist, who's got another friend who's got a signage company, and he often rings me and says, can I have a photo of this bird? So, when you walk into a zoo, there's often an information sheet about a particular species. So I've done a lot of that too. So, there's quite a number of books. A really good friend of mine is Angus McNabb. I travel with him too when he's available. And he put out a book a few years back called Wildlife Tasmania, and he's just about to release one of the wildlife of Victoria. And he's a wonderful photographer too. So I've got a few photos of his books too.
Yeah, lovely. That's so great. And you must. I wanted to talk about this as well. You must be quite a role model for because as a teacher, you must be quite a role model for your students. And I'm wondering how much overlap you have. Is there any overlap with birding in your work as a teacher? Do you sometimes combine the two? Do you talk about it with students or other teachers?
Oh, all the time. Basically, when I come back from a trip, I'll run a session in the lecture theatre if people want to come along. And I get a lot of people that do come along. Staff ask me every day, I saw this thing in my backyard today. And then the marketing, we have these big screens around the school, there might be, 20 of them, huge screens. And it's just sort of to promote what's happening in the school at the moment. And whenever I get back, the guy who runs it says, can I have a selection of your photos? And we'll put that on the screen. Again, it's sort of just reinforcing the environment and wildlife and what's out there. So, yeah, and the overlap, I guess, there's as a teacher, there's a skill set, and I think a lot of that applies to birding too. We've touched on it before: research, organisation, planning, communication with people. I think those skills really lend itself well to the birding community. So so that's basically how the two sort of mesh together. And I have no doubt that there are a lot of young people around this area. I'm in Braybrook, that are more conscious of their natural world because of what they've seen at school. So, and there's a lot of topics in science. Often the science teachers ask me to come in and run a topic on whales and things like that, which is great because then I can actually say, see this photo here? I took it, and this is the story behind it. And, the kids are amazed. I talk about the Black Grasswren story and the Princess Parrot, but there's hundreds more if you talk about, whales and snakes and all sorts of things that you photograph. And then again, it comes back to the same thing, the journey. The journey is the true joy of it all. Yeah, that's incredible, and like I said, it must be really inspiring to the students, and it's a great way to kind of pass on the passion to the future generations. Education is so important. Mm-hmm. I think we've got a moral obligation to do it, and I thoroughly, I get kids come up to me when I'm on yard duty and they say, "Oh, sir, tell us about that humpback whale we saw on the screen the other day." They're wanting to learn, and as I said, I think it's a moral obligation that we've all got to actually share and network and pass the baton and send the message out there that we have in Australia. We're just so blessed to have this wonderful natural world and the wildlife within it. So enjoy it. I rarely go overseas. Rarely. I've been overseas twice in my life, and I don't have any need to because I'll go somewhere in Australia.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if you've done much birding overseas, but that answers my question. That's really interesting because Australia is a world in itself, isn't it? It's just so great. It is.
And I haven't done any birding overseas, but a lot of my friends, Scott Baker's now a guide overseas in Asia, and every day is on my back about going. So it's going to be the next frontier for me, but there's still things to do here in Australia. As I said, Macquarie Island, Lord Howe Island, Ashmore Reef, the Abrolhos Islands. I haven't been there. there's still more for me to do before I feel comfortable and go into Asia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so much more to see. And I've got a question here, which I haven't asked any of my previous guests, and it's a kind of a tricky question, but I'm curious to see how you respond.
Yeah.
If there's anything we can learn from birds, what would that be?
Patience and resilience. Well, I'll change that to birding.
Right.
Look, I think we can learn a lot from birds themselves. I mean, you look at so many species and they mate for life, which to me is just, something us humans perhaps have not done as well as perhaps we would like to. But birding itself, what does it teach you? It teaches you an appreciation of our world. It gets me out of bed on these holidays, at dawn. It teaches me resilience, because not every time you go looking for a target, you'll get it. And thus it teaches you patience. That Princess Parrot trip, 12 months in research, almost daily research. And rather than just say, all right, next holidays, I'm going to drive up and go and do that. No, you've got to do your research proper. You've got to be patient. So I think they're the things that I've really learned from birding. And I think also birding has made me a better person, if that sort of makes sense, in the context of dealing with people and sharing information. I get so much joy when I have a person contact me and say, any idea where I can get this bird? And I'll send an email back, maybe a mud map. And they contact me and they say, thank you. I share their joy. So I do think in many ways being involved in the natural world has made me a better person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate what you said about connecting with people and sharing the joy, because it really is that way, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it is. And I want to share a really important story, only a quick one with you. When I did my first pelagic off Tasmania, I was invited at the last moment that someone pulled out, and I was with a crew of really experienced birders, really well-known, famous birders in Australia. And one of them was a fellow by the name of Dan Mantle from Perth. And Dan basically put his camera away and he stood next to me all day and showed me everything and told me about the bird. So he sacrificed his whole day to teach me. And I've never forgotten that gift he gave me. And we often laugh about it. And I say, that day you did that, you gave me a gift, and I now pass that gift on to other people. I love to take people out and see them enjoy it and get a new bird and learn about it. And I put that down to Dan. Dan gave me that gift. My job is to give it back or share it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. Yeah.
Yeah. And Plaxi Barrett's his partner, and she's well known too. And when I ring there, she says, "Oh, your boyfriend's just here."
That's just lovely. Yeah, and it's just again, it goes to show that this has also been a theme about the podcast. Birding is as much about people as it is about birds.
Yeah. And look, I know of some solo people out there. And good luck to them. Everyone, each to their own, what they want to do. But also, I think, having a couple of mates, we have great chats around the fire at night, and traveling in the car. And it's also a bit more about safety, being by yourself in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if that's something I really want to do. So from the safety element, that is.
And I wanted also to see if you had any tips for beginner birders who might be watching or listening, but also for more veteran, advanced birders. Any reminders? What would you say?
Yeah, okay. There's a couple of things. I've probably touched on a couple of them already, and that is just be patient, do your research, be resilient. there are days you're not going to get the birds you want to see. That's okay. You just have to realise. I mean, if it was that easy all the time, there wouldn't be such a challenge. The other thing which I think is important too is being ethical. And when I talk about being ethical, I'm talking about, I mentioned before people put in sticks in hollows so you get a better photo. I mean, to me, that is atrocious. And to me, that is reflective of that person's character. Also, if I come across a bird that's nesting, I'm really quick to get away. So yeah, and just protecting habitat and things like that. So ethical birding, I think that's really, really important. And the final thing I'll say about that is, I encourage people, if they do a big trip, to do a trip report. I do it for all my trips. I've got lots and lots of trip reports, and I know a lot of people, when they say, where can I find this bird, I'll send them my trip report. And I think that's a really good way of sharing the information too. So, and I love going back and reading those trip reports, oh yeah, we bumped into this character, and so,
yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And it's also kind of like a memoir for yourself, isn't it? And just
it is.
And do you put photos with the trip report, like as a?
Oh yeah. My first 3 or 4 I didn't. Then someone said, why don't you put photos? And of course, yes. So my last 5 or 6 have all got photos. So and there's a fellow called Bruce Richardson who's written a book called the My Birding Year, and that's sort of a memoir of his year. And he was one of the fellows on the Princess Parrot trip. So his second book's just about to be released, and I think a lot of it's on the Princess Parrot trip.
Oh, okay, yeah. Fascinating. What a dream! What a dream!
Yeah, absolutely. But there's still one bird I need to see, and I've had 3 goes for it. It is the Holy Grail. You know what I'm talking about?
Is it the night parrot?
Yes, it's a night parrot.
Yeah. Wow. So are you? That's probably your next target bird, is it? Or
yeah, I've got a trip next June. My 4th trip for it. 3 before with Scott and a fellow called Greg Roberts, who's really well known in the birding community, and that's sort of been his passion for 30 years to find the night parrot. And we have, again, the journey, have so much fun. Diamantina, we were there one day. I think it was in our last trip. We started setting up a camp underneath this tree, and Scott said, we can't camp here. I said, why? He said, look up there, 10 feet. There was a grey falcon nest there with 2 grey falcons sitting there. So we just packed up, got out of there. It's the lowest grey falcon nest I've ever seen, low to the ground. So there's other things we can chase there. We're hoping to get a bilby one day, and but yeah, we're having another crack at the night parrot. And I guess I work on statistics. So the more times you go, the more likelihood you're going to get one. So we've got thermal cameras now. So hopefully that might be a bit of a game changer.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, wow. That's just so great. Oh, night parrot. Imagine that. That really is the holy grail. I would say that's the holy grail of Aussie birding.
Oh, it is, without a doubt, as is probably the white-throated grasswren, which I haven't got. And number 3 is probably Princess Parrot. They're the 3.
Yeah. Oh, that's just fantastic. That's just great. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up. I've got one last question, which I think is I find interesting, because a lot of people can relate to this, especially given the last 18 months. Is but first of all, you're in what part of Melbourne are you in again?
Braybrook, Footscray, Sunshine.
Oh right, okay, yeah. So when we were with 5K and 10K, what was your regular patch? How did you cope with that? Where did you go birding most?
Yeah, well, that's another interesting story. Well, normally when we don't have lockdown, I guess I call my local patch Western Treatment Plant, because I'm only about 40 minutes away. But during this time, and I live by myself too, so I thought, and I did struggle last year with lockdown. So I thought this time what I'm going to do is every lunchtime I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a little 5-minute doco on a local bird. And then I'm going to come back and download it to the staff portal. And it just exploded. It just exploded. So people are asking, when's your next episode coming up? And, you know, you could talk about, the humble magpie. You know, we have white-backed magpies here around Sunshine, whereas most magpies are black-back. They're a subspecies. And I was watching, I was filming this magpie walking on the grass, stopping and eating grubs. And I said, they're actually listening. They're actually, people don't, simple things. They just thought, we never knew. You know, I did a bit of footage on a marsh lapwing nest from a distance and told them about, they actually nest in the median strip of one of the busiest streets in Sunshine. So I found those little videos were fantastic within a 5K range, and it made me actually appreciate more about what we've got around here locally. So that's how I dealt with it, and not just reptiles, not just birds. I did a couple on frogs and a couple on snakes and things like that. So.
Yeah, lovely. And I often say that it the lockdown was kind of almost beneficial in a way to us birders and naturalists generally, because it forced us to look within rather than without.
It did. There has been some pain when people find this fantastic bird, which we can't twitch. You know about twitching. Stop everything, hop on an aeroplane, fly there, find it, fly back. Sort of a mini version of the Black Grasswren trip. We can't do that. That's been a bit painful seeing these people get these fantastic rare birds that we can't get.
Yeah, but I think that's a good place to end the episode. And well, I've got to ask you the obligatory question very briefly. What's your favourite bird?
I get this question every time I do a presentation, so I always leave the last slide for it, and it's the Regent Bowerbird. Just because of the jaw-dropping colours.
Yeah, wow.
Of the male. And if you go to O'Reilly's on the other side of the border in Queensland, they come down and they feed every morning. And wow, what a bird! I just sit there stunned. How did God create such a thing with the colours and the sheen and just amazing? So that is my favourite bird.
Wow, yeah.
And my next favourite bird is the one I haven't seen yet.
As it would be, eh?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, let's end it there, Bok. Thanks so much for coming on, and I hope you've had a good time. I certainly did.
Yeah, and, great. And thank you so much, Guillaume, for the opportunity. And I hope people get some enjoyment and some inspiration from this. And I think you're doing a wonderful job in actually sharing birding in this medium, in this format, on this platform. So well done, and I look forward to following you in the future.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you, Bok. See you soon.
Okay, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You have been listening to the Birding Today podcast. New episodes are released every Friday, and if you'd like to get in touch, just write an email to birdingtoday@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. No, it doesn't all have to be live. Like because I do quite a lot of post-production, so I can cut some stuff out if. Yeah. So it'll be seamless. Like the end product is like kind of like a. I don't want to edit too much out of it, but just to make it flow as naturally as possible as well.